back to Brian's Beat.
Hour two of Brian's Beat. Welcome. Beautiful day. I mean, pretty nice. Temperature up in the 50s right now in Fairhaven, and also 50 degrees in New Bedford. Our quote of the day, courtesy of monthlyfeerx.com. If you're spending less than $20 a month for prescription drugs, great. If not, then our monthly fee RX service might be a good option for you. Check for yourself at monthlyfeerx.com. Today is Thomas Jefferson's birthday. Don't think he's doing too much celebrating. I think about this every once in a while. I think about it with Jefferson and Adams. They both, John Adams, they both passed away on the same date, which happened to be July 4. I forgot the year, in the 1800s. And Ben Franklin, Samuel Adams. I wonder if they could look at the United States of America the way it is today. I wonder what they would think. Jefferson, when I was looking up a timely quote for him, this is the one I came up with. Timid men prefer the calm of despotism to the tempestuous sea of liberty. Isn't that fitting for where we are right now? Now, I would change, and I'm sure Jefferson, having the foresight, he would probably change men to timid people. But the mere fact is, we, the people, we're tools for what government says and wants us to do. Now, you may say, this is the freest country around. Well, look around. Take the lenses and change them on your eyes. Because time and again, the United States slips down a notch or two or six from where it used to be the freest, more open country, and free as in taxes, free as in personal liberties. We're not that country that we used to be. Timid men prefer the calm of despotism to the tempestuous sea of liberty. Yeah, I mean, you got to be brave to fight it. When we think about Franklin, Franklin was sitting in a bathtub over in Paris. But you think about Adams and Jefferson, Patrick Henry, Crispus Attucks. Those guys were willing to give up everything, their property, their livelihoods, even their life, in this pursuit of freedom. Patriots Day is celebrated on Monday. It is actually the 19th, so I guess next Friday is when the Revolutionary War started in 1775. It's all pretty nicely wrapped up. We have Jefferson's birthday this week, the beginning of the Revolutionary War toward the end of the week. And by the way, one of these days, either yesterday, today, or tomorrow, marks the ending of the Revolutionary War. Isn't that good for the month of April? 508-996-0500 is how you get onto the program today. But, yeah. I guess we're fat and happy. We're okay with how things are going. And the reason why I say that is there's a lot of complaining about migrants, illegal people coming into the United States. If we know the law well enough, and most of us do not, folks that cross over illegally, which is a misdemeanor called trespassing, they then get marched. If they say asylum, they get marched over to one of these Custom and Border Patrol huts. They spend, could be 24 to 48 hours saying pleading their case, why they should be allowed to be here in the United States, why, or more to the point, why they need to get away from where they came from. And then they get a court date. And they're allowed to roam around here in the United States. And we understand that. Now, you may not like the fact that they're allowed to roam around, and you might think that, well, most of them aren't going to show up in court. Well, according to Customs and Border Patrol, 90%, so 9 out of every 10, they do show up to go to court. All right, so that's there. Now, what should happen in between is where I think the yous and me's have a lot of wiggle room to fight. I say the yous and me's as in right here in the Commonwealth. Because quite frankly, we're allowing people to come in from out of state. But they are U.S. citizens. They can come in from out of state and take advantage of this shelter law that we have. Never mind coming in from outside the country and qualifying for it. This is where the yous and me's need to make a stand. Whether it means a ballot question or throwing the bums out that are going to keep on voting this in. I was saying to Barry yesterday, you know what? They're fighting over, should it be $500 million? Should it be $750 million? Should it be $1 billion? They're not fighting over whether this should be allowed to happen. Yet there are plenty of yous and me's out there that believe it should not be allowed to happen. But I guess we are timid men. We are timid people. And so the despots are, just wiggling their fingers and saying, well, they might care, but who's really paying attention to them? 508-996-0500 is how you get onto the program today. Hello.
What's up, Brian's beat?
I'm beating around.
So I try to always figure out the word beat, how you came up with it. Is it because you're a great percussionist, or is it because you're always tired? Or is it because this is your beat, like in your neighborhood?
I got to tell you, man, you spend too much time worrying about me. But two out of three, you're right.
I was on hold. I had a minute to think. There you go.
So drum beat, yes, and Brian's beat, as in this is my beat.
But you're never tired.
Oh, God, I'm always tired, but I still do the beat.
You can make all three. There you go. Yeah, I think it's funny. This I don't know if you heard the Trump press conference yesterday with the Speaker of the House, but
Johnson.
Yeah, Johnson, little guy. I'm surprised Trump hasn't said something about him being little, because he's like half the size of Trump. It's kind of funny when they're standing together.
Johnson.
His whole spiel yesterday was about the fact that they're not going to do anything. Democratic states and legislators aren't going to do anything about the illegal alien problem. They're giving them everything they possibly could need, because at the end of it, it's get them a license, and then at that point they're registered to vote, because you can register to vote at the point where you get your license, or there's many other places you can register to vote. And once they're registered, they're voting, and it's a 15 million voter block. You don't know which way it's going to go, but I'm assuming that if someone's going to put down a paper ballot in front of them and say, I can't reload your ATM card until you fill out this form. and then they fill out the form.
I shouldn't laugh about that.
Well, I'm serious.
Yeah, I know you are. Yeah.
When, there's a desperation of power with the left. That's the right has it too. I mean, but this is we don't care. There was a survey done recently with a bunch of liberal elites, and like 46% of them said that they would prefer to win an election even if they had to cheat. So there you go.
Really?
Yeah. This came out about a week ago. It was they were surveying different groups of people, and when they got to the liberal elites, which are those are the people that are the most woke, the affluent white liberal females, and they basically they said like 46% were like, well, if we can't win an election fairly, we'd rather cheat to win, and it was like, oh, well, there you go. I think if you look it up on Google, you'll find it, because I saw it in a couple of news clips, and I just started laughing. I'm like, well, there you go. What we did was when we gave these people their soccer trophies and said everybody gets one, it wasn't to make them feel better. We created a monster, which is I want. And so when you say that a lot, you say I want, and what is the cost? I want it at all costs. I want it even if I cheat. So that's what we created with the soccer trophy kids. Anyway, I think if you had Jefferson and Franklin and those guys back today, they would say that the pursuit of liberty, I guess I'm going to just guess, is that they were creating liberty for all people, individuals, and they would see liberty being positioned into groups of people, not about, and groups of people put against each other, political groups, race groups, all of those different things. But from their perspective, it was just giving the individual person liberty. So I think they would see that as a stark contrast, if anything.
Oh, I think that is. I think that's part of it. And certainly when I think of Jefferson, at least what I've read about him, whether he wrote it or somebody else wrote it about him, he would definitely fall into that category. More to the point, he believed that if the United States ever got around to having cities like European cities at that time, the Parises, the Romes, the Londons, that we would be doomed. Well, what do you call Washington, Philadelphia, New York,
Chicago?
I was going to say, never mind Chicago, San Francisco, or L.A.
How about a small city like Portland? Portland is complete. Looks like a bombing run went through there and for 30 days straight. I mean, it's a mess. Yeah, I was just down in New York City last week on a sales trip, and I hadn't been down there in 6 months. And there's so many streets that had lots of little bodega. Well, I shouldn't say bodega. They were more like boutique stores. All the boutique stores are gone. They're all closed. So it
was the same way up in North Adams where I was this past week. Hey, thanks for the call. I do appreciate it. When I was, I mentioned earlier I was up in North Adams over, I guess it was Wednesday I went up there. And I looked around the old movie theater, the Mohawk Theater, closed. The old Sheraton Hotel, closed. Actually, it's a new hotel, different name. The great thing about the Sheraton, the letter R, the whole time that I went to school there, that letter R was burned out. They never fixed it. So it's a Sheaton. And I used to go around and go, hey, we're going over to the Shiaton. No more Shiaton. It's some other hotel chain. I want to say it's a Hilton. Don't quote me on that. I forgot, but it wasn't there. I went down Route 8 to check out a couple of the bars that we used to frequent. They weren't there. And now back to campus, right across the street from the townhouses where I used to live, there used to be a mini market called Ashland Street Mini Market. Closed, boarded up. There are apartments on top. People still rent the apartments on top of that building, but the store in and of itself is closed. A block or so up the street, there's a Cumberland Farms, which didn't exist at that time when I was going to school there. On the other side of the mini market used to be a liquor store called the Chalet. It is now some kind of pizza place. So, things, over what? I left there in 79. So over 45 years, things are going to change. But the fact that the college is buying up property and using that money, you wonder why kids don't have the money to go to school, never mind the inflation numbers that came out this week. But the cost of college is so much that kids can no longer afford to go to school. Their parents can't afford to send them to school, and they may not be able to qualify for some type of student loan. Or smart families start weighing, well, if you've got to pay back $750 a month on student loans, are you going to make enough money in order to do that? And parents have to think about that because they could be a co-signer. So if something happens to their son or daughter and that son or daughter cannot pay, guess who has to pay? The co-signers. So I can see why the student population went from 2,200 down to 900 at that campus. Student population, student enrollment is down at UMass Dartmouth. And it seems that it's down at all of the state colleges and state universities. So you've got I don't know, I don't like using this term, but it seems to fit. You've got that perfect storm. You've got kids and families that are paying a much higher tuition if they can afford to do it. You have on campus now a lot of positions that aren't professor or teaching class positions, like diversity counselors and mental health folks. I'm not going to sit here and say they are necessary or not necessary, but they are being funded. You've got all of these positions right now that have to be paid for. And so what the colleges are doing, or at least what I could see, and what I'm hearing at Boston University and at Emerson and some of the other schools here in the Commonwealth, graduate assistants are teaching a lot of these classes. Adjunct professors are teaching these classes. Adjunct or associate professor is someone that isn't on the regular payroll. They get paid per diem or a little bit better to do these classes. They usually don't get benefits. So where the tenured professors used to be, you now have diversity directors and these types of positions on top of new buildings being erected. And these buildings, to the best of my knowledge, since we're talking colleges, universities, schools, those buildings aren't on the tax roll of said city. Now, the people that might use those buildings or work in those buildings, yes, they would be a part of the tax-paying public. But I would say that the majority of those people were teaching at that campus in another building prior to this one building opening up, where there used to be a women's dorm, women's only dorm, and a men's only dorm. All the dorms now are co-ed. They're all co-ed. As if to say there are some guys that don't want to live with women and there's some women that don't want to live with men. They're all co-ed. And yes, of course, there are the all-gender bathrooms. Sign of the times, I guess. Pain in the rump, without a doubt. But I can see, you add it all up. The money part, all of the diversity, equity, inclusion, rape crisis centers. Again, not that they're not necessary or wanted. I'm just saying, but you add all of this up, and I can see why you have fewer and fewer students enrolling in college. You're paying that bill. And quite frankly, I look at a Southern New Hampshire University or whatever it's called, where people are going to school online and paying a lot less money and getting a degree that says, yes, you did graduate, here's your bachelor's. That's where people are going. People are going to the Bristol Community Colleges and the Cape Cod Community College. They're getting a 2-year degree, and then they're turning around, and they might take, I don't know why. I was getting my teeth done up at BCC. This young woman, Sierra Pereira, who I've gotten to know over the past couple of years. She does a wonderful job. Too bad she's graduating, because now I'm going to have to pay. But, she's somebody worth following because I like the job that she does. She's there because she's getting the bang for her buck. She's going to come out. She already has the associate's degree, and now she's going to have a hygienist certificate, so she can work pretty much anywhere and get paid pretty darn well. Not everybody wants that type of lifestyle. I get it. But as you look, as your grandchildren look and your children look at the future of their children, instead of saying, yeah, well, college is a definite, weigh the options. I've got a degree. When I was a kid, it wasn't a matter, are you going to college? It was, where are you going to go to college? But times are different. Most people, when they're choosing where to go to school, they're thinking about how much money they're going to make on the other side. Well, you can make a lot of money. I mean, doctors, lawyers, dentists, they make buco buck. But they have huge loans to pay off. Are you going to be able to do it? Is your child or grandchild going to be able to pull that off? 508-996-0500. And then the inflation numbers came out. Welcome back. I'm not a Joe Biden fan, not a Donald Trump fan. But I think if the buck stops at any one doorstep, in this particular case, it stops with the Biden administration. The inflation numbers for March came out a couple of days ago. And boy, there's certain things here I think you already you already know about. But there are bits and pieces that are staring me in the face right now as I look at these numbers, and I'm saying, well, I did not know that. And chances are you didn't know it either. So the flat number, inflation up 0.4% for March over February. March over March, up 3.5%. But here are some of the numbers as we look at what's happening. Let's talk about where you really know it and where you probably feel it the most. Gasoline. I drove by BJ's this morning. It's already over $3 a gallon. I think it said $3.04 per gallon. Last time I was over at BJ's, last time I looked, it was $2.99. So sometime between Thursday and this morning when I drove by, it was up 5 cents. And it was up a few cents from what it was earlier in the week. When I was out in the western part of the state, every place, gas was over $3. I had to get some gas on the way back. I think I was in Milford or one town away from Milford, and I paid $3.40 some odd cents. I just got a few dollars worth because I knew when I got to the BJ's I'd be back in safe company. But even BJ's now is over $3 a gallon. Groceries. Now, here's one that will kick you in the teeth. You might know the numbers, but still, think about this. If you bought a basket full of groceries in March of 2023, whatever you paid for that basket of groceries, if you bought the same items in March of 24, you are paying $445 more. Now, that's for the entire month. That's not just one day shopping. $445 more. Think about it. What could you do with $445 a month? That's more than $5,000 for the entire year. What could you do with that money? Couldn't you live just a little bit better? Wouldn't you not have to worry so much about your rent payment or your mortgage payment? Housing. Let's look at a couple of housing. Electricity. That was up just 5%. And as far as if you rent an apartment, rent a house, rent a condo, that's up just under 6%, 5.9%. So between the electricity and the rent in and of itself, you're paying 10% more than what you paid last year. Same month of March. And we didn't talk about gas heat or oil heat. Here's one that I didn't figure, and yet I knew that I paid a little bit more this year. Car, truck, whatever, vehicle insurance. Vehicle insurance. The largest jump since Gerald Ford was president. Vehicle insurance up 22%, actually 22.2%, 222. And you wonder why things are so tight. And President Biden, He's got a plan. Yeah, put it on an Etch-a-Sketch, because every time you come up with a plan, somebody shakes that Etch-a-Sketch and your plan is gone. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Donald Trump has a plan or a better plan. But I want you to think about these numbers. In particular, think about these numbers as you think about that college student or that student that wants to go to college but is having a hard time making ends meet, or their family is having a hard time making ends meet. Now, let's do what we call piling on. The legislature is talking maybe $500 million for the migrant shelter system. The governor is thinking, how about $1 billion? And we know that they eat through 75 million a month. So we're told. All this money. And you wonder why you're paying more for groceries this year, because government's paying a lot of bills and then you have to turn around and pay these bills. Now, fortunately, I'm not in this particular category anymore, but there are plenty of people that are. Baby formula. Baby formula. You're paying 10% more for baby formula this year, last month, than you paid in March of 2023. 10%. Somewhere along the line, you got to say that's a lot. We talked about car insurance before. What about auto repairs? That's up 11.6%. Can you see where your money is going? Or maybe you didn't before, but I get the feeling that time and time again, people are looking and they're saying, I can't afford to stay here anymore. A woman friend and I, we talk about this with the apartment. Can we afford it? Did you ever think that the price would go from where it was 5 years ago to where it is now? And she shakes her head no, and I shake my head no. Everything keeps going up. Now, there's a natural cost of living increase, but this is way more than that. One more item before I take the phone call. Elderly home care. So in other words, you've got a senior, anybody over the age of 65, who is living in the house and needs to have someone or some people come in to take care of that person. Last year, it went up the highest it has ever gone up, or as long as tallies have been taken. Elderly home care up 14.2%. Wow. 508-996-0500. Hello.
Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Winging and wanging.
Good. You're talking about the inflation numbers?
Yes.
But something, Brian? You know how much it costs to buy a 99.99 ounce gold coin from the Treasury? It's going to cost you $52.10. That's how you can tell that the dollar is being devalued. It's by how much it's going to cost you to buy a gold coin.
Well, what you're telling me is how much gold is really in that coin. Not much.
Right. Well, 99.99 ounce. I mean, there's always impurities in there, so it can't be, a complete purity. But I'm saying is, my point is, that's your barometer. I know you talk about the crypto barometer, but you compare the fiat currency of the dollar because of reckless spending, trade imbalances, high national debt. And we've talked about this before. And that's where we are. And as far as the college is concerned, I mean, it's not about education. And the so-called experts tell you it's about the experience. You have to have a fitness gym, shuttle bus services. You got to have these big stadiums and mega centers so they can have sports activities. And it's just the average person is just being priced out. You're right.
How much longer do we let it go like that? I mean, this eventually, I don't want to see what happened in 1917 over in the former Russia. But at some particular point, the yous and me's, we have to put our foot down and do something about this, or, everything is going to collapse.
Yeah, you're right.
You know what? We may not look like Venezuela, but our dollar tells us we are.
I think you're going to look like Brazil. I mean, look at Brazil and all the infrastructure, dilapidated people living in forests and dirt roads. I mean, we're getting there. But on the college, in the turn of the century, that's when you had that boom of all these colleges popping up everywhere and the stadiums and all of that. And over the decades, it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. But I see considerable downsizing of community college and other state colleges. Not many people at the turn of the century went to college. It was a very small
absolutely
percentage.
not. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was something special. I don't know how many community colleges there were at the turn of the century.
Probably not many.
Yeah.
Probably not many. But I think it's gotten to a point where you've had an oversaturation of colleges and universities, and like you're saying, the skyrocketing costs, people it's out of reach, and you just have enough to turn the lights on, and I just can't imagine parents paying that kind of money, like you're saying. I mean, it's going to bankrupt anybody.
Look, Boston University, there was a story earlier this week in the Boston Globe where tuition, $66,000 next year. And that's
incredible.
That's not including the room and board and some of the other fees. $66,000. I think when they added everything up, it was over $90,000.
Right, and interest rates are going up, and I heard something on the AP. 92% of Americans are on credit card debt in one form or another, and 8% have got them paid off. So there's a lot of debt. And Jerome Powell thinks increasing the interest rate is the answer. That's like the death knell.
We are in deep doo-doo. Jerome Powell needs to resign or be fired. Thanks for the call.
Right.
I do appreciate it. 508-996-0500. We'll take one more. Hello.
Hey, Wing.
Hey, Wang.
What's going on?
I'm winging and wanging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I tried that once, and I hurt myself. So I stopped doing it.
There's you have to do it on the side of the couch.
Jesus. Well, that was an interesting topic, actually. What you just ended with. One thing I was very interested. I started doing a little bit of reading on fiat currency and a little bit on the old gold standard. What I didn't realize, and probably a lot of people don't realize unless they're really interested in macroeconomics and stuff, which, whatever, most people aren't. But what I read was when we were under the gold standard, the United States government pinned the price of gold. You couldn't invest in gold and gold goes up and down. It was the government that says, all right, gold is $28 an ounce. That's what the government said. That's what they did with the gold standard, which I thought was interesting because that's antithetical to what, a free market does. So that's one thing I didn't even realize they did. I thought it was always tagged to the price of gold, and I was like, well, how do you price gold in $1 and then the dollar is priced in gold? It didn't make sense to me, but that's how they did it. So they actually, the federal government priced gold and pinned it. And after World War II, we owned 75% of the world's gold, which is how we became the world's reserve currency. That's literally the beginning of the start of, or the beginning of how we became a world power. It was after World War II.
So
and we owned pretty much everything.
You know, you're missing a big piece.
Go ahead.
In 1933, I believe it was, FDR made people turn in their gold.
Correct. So he took us off the gold standard.
No, I don't think he took us off the. No, he made people. He confiscated our gold. He didn't. I say confiscated. People were paid X amount of dollars, but then the price jacked up right after that.
So the reason why he did that was so he could run a deficit. Because when we were pinned to the gold standard, we had to actually every dollar we created in the Treasury, every dollar we issued out of the Treasury had to be there had to be a corresponding gold amount in Fort Knox or wherever.
A dollar for dollar match.
Right, exactly. So when he took us off that, he was able to run a deficit to fund all of his social programs, but also fund the war. And that's how we came off the. There
wasn't a war
World
then.
War II.
That wasn't that didn't happen for several years afterwards.
Oh, 1930. All right, 1933 is what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay, I'm getting my years mixed up. I know he did something to.
He did a lot of somethings. He did a lot of somethings.
So it wasn't to fund the war. It was to start his Social Security programs and all these other programs to get us out of the Great Depression. And that's how he took us off of the gold standard. Not Bretton Woods. Bretton Woods was completely different in 1971 with Richard Nixon. What FDR did was take us off the gold standard back in the 1930s so we could run deficits and debt more fluently without the gold being pegged. The other thing that I actually wanted to bring up to you was a little off the topic, but it was in regards to something local with the business improvement district that Chris talks about all the time.
The downtown district?
Yeah. So what I heard, a lot of these progressive-minded people that were speaking there, they were concerned that the assessment by the business district, the assessment on the property owner would be passed on to the renter, which would be passed on to the consumer. And ultimately, you'd end up with less consumers and probably vacant storefronts, which I went, that's interesting coming from a progressive who consistently talks about raising prices or raising taxes on wealthy people, not thinking the exact same thing is going to happen at a larger scale when you do it at the state level, whether the millionaire's tax or some kind of corporate tax. It happens all the time. The very thing that they advocate for at the state level, they're advocating against at the local level. They don't see how it's completely hypocritical. They're saying if we're getting this assessment tax on the property owner, it's going to be passed on to the renter. Well, no kidding.
Well, it might be passed on to the renter, but eventually it's going to get passed on to the consumer.
Right, through higher prices. And what I thought was, do they not see how hypocritical that is when they support these politicians that want to raise taxes at the state and federal level? It literally does the same exact thing. They are advocating for it at a state level as if it doesn't, just because you change the name of a tax doesn't mean the tax acts any different.
Yeah,
whether it's an income tax or a business assessment improvement district tax, it all acts the same. It gets passed on to the consumer. And
I got you. I'm going to let you go. I want to get one more in before the break. Hey, thanks for the call. 508-996-0500. Hello.
Oh, hey, Tim. I heard him talking about gold and that. I'm a baby boomer. So in 1968, when I first had to think about the minimum wage, it was $1.60, and the ounce of gold was $32. And so it took you exactly 20 hours at minimum wage to buy an ounce of gold. Now, if you took today's ounce of gold, and I haven't looked at it this morning, but it was over 2,000 a few weeks ago, divide that by
20 hours,
and you're going to get $100 an hour minimum wage.
I hope that's what you're making.
Well, that just shows the cost of living has changed since '68. You're getting a lot less for what you used to get. And so the cheating has happened in such a magnificent form that people can't even, it's like a tide washing over somebody. And people are born into fake numbers, and they never kept up with them to begin with, much less where they are in a given moment. So the idea of living with money is pretty dangerous when it comes time to, living in a typhoon or living in a real situation. So, yeah, money, these old boys, if you let them go, don't tell us, oh, we can't clean up the pollution because it's too expensive. Well, what's the result of that? We get poisoned and you never clean it up? It's pretty obvious what's going on. Supreme Court giving away, but they got this case coming up that basically says that experts aren't needed anymore.
Yeah. I'm going to let you go only because of time, but I do appreciate the call. We are whittling down Ken Pittman coming up after the top of the hour news. Hey, time for me to pack up my bags and get on out of here. Ken will be with you after ABC at the top of the hour. We will do it again next Saturday right here on WBSM. Thank you much for your calls. And, there he is. Standing up there. Nice and tall. Looks like his vehicle is working again, too.